Hello, everyone, and welcome to Marketing Local TV in a Changing Media Ecosystem, a TV News Check Working Lunch webinar. I'm Kathy Haley, publisher of TV News Check, and I'm very pleased to be able to introduce our distinguished group of speakers today. Frank Cicha is Executive Vice President of Programming for Fox television stations. Meredith Conti is Vice President of Consumer and Ad Sales Marketing at Tegna. Therese Gamba is Chief Marketing Officer and Senior Vice President of Acquired Programming at NBCU-owned television stations. Stephen Arnold is President of Stephen Arnold Music. Rich Colbert is Principal of PPI Releasing. Our moderator is Ken Werner, former president of Warner Brothers Domestic Television Distribution. If you'd like to ask a question of our speakers today during the webinar, you can do that at any point by using the Q&A feature on your Zoom screen. Please avoid using the chat feature. We're using that for internal communications. Ken, please begin when you're ready.
That's great. So excited to see everybody today. As it turns out, we're talking to you all in your homes, which is something that I think we've all gotten used to. For marketing executives, that's an interesting challenge, I know, as is everybody in the station community. We're thrilled to be here today to address this really important and interesting topic, which is how all of you are charged with reaching out in your populations to tell people about your television stations and all the different things that you have to offer. We're going to make this hopefully a very interactive conversation. If you have questions, you can put them into the chat. And I'm very excited sort of to lay out the context, and then we'll dive right in. So the context for our conversation is basically the fact that any number of years ago, each of you had the responsibility of running probably one television station in a market where there may have been 5 or 6 television stations. You had cable and satellite coming in, you had some home video, but you were the king of the hill. You had great reach, everybody knew you, and you had limited competition locally. Today, the world's turned upside down. We have SVOD, we have all sorts of different video competition coming in. You have very challenging circumstances from that, but in addition to which, you not only have one station to run, you may have 2 or 3 stations to run. You may have a DigiNet, or 2 or 3. You may have websites. So all of those things you're being asked to market, and that creates a lot of different challenges. So we put together a great panel today that has sort of different perspectives to it. If you look at Therese from NBC Universal, she's part of a company that is Comcast, the Peacock, the NBC Network, USA channels, her television stations, her DigiNets. So it's a totally vertically integrated company, and she has bosses who have different priorities as well. We then have, if you look at Tegna, Tegna is more of a pure play in the sense that it doesn't have that vertical integration, but it certainly has DigiNets and multiple television stations. You look at Fox, it used to be a big studio. Now they've sold off that part of the studio. And so they have the television stations, the DigiNets, a network, and cable services. So everybody has sort of a different corporate structure, and we're going to, and a different perspective on that. And then we're fortunate enough to have Steve Arnold, who comes to it from a service point of view. He's turned to by people to say, tell me what to do and tell me how to accomplish it. And Steve Colbert, who also has a responsibility in the ecosystem, but a different one in terms of providing programming. So we're going to start off by talking to our station people to sort of set the stage, and then we're going to move into all sorts of different tactics and things like that. So I'd like to start with Therese, and could you do us a favor and sort of take us through, if you will, the number of stations, the number of duopolies, et cetera, to get a sense of your context, and then let us know in terms of how you think about prioritizing. And then we'll go to Meredith and Frank with the same conversation.
Okay, well, thanks, Ken. It's good to see you. I miss chatting with you all the time when we were talking about Ellen and other great shows from Warner Brothers. So NBC Universal owned stations. We are 42 stations in 30 markets, and we have 12 duopolies. Our duopolies are actually unique in that it is, English language and Spanish language with the Telemundo networks. We also have 3 Diginets. We have Cozy TV, which has been on since 2013. That's more classic and retro television. We have Telexidos, which is part of our Telemundo station group. That's a little bit more action adventure and gears a little bit more towards younger men. And then we have NBCLX, which debuted late last year, and that is a news product that's really geared towards 18 to 45-year-olds. We also have 7, I want to make sure I get this right because it's brand new, 7 RSNs. We have NECN, New England Cable News, that comes out of our Boston station. We have about 35 apps across the division. We have a production company. We have an in-house marketing company. And I was thinking back when you asked me to be on this panel, because I started in August of 2011 and we had 10 stations. And I thought, man, I'm going to be really, really busy. But now with the broad range of our division, it really gives us a advantage in the marketplace in that we are, almost over 30% of the country in our reach. And then when you look at how we operate, our president of our division, Val Staub, really truly believes that everything needs to be handled locally. So those are 42 individual businesses and 3 different Diginets that all have their own branding departments. They have their sales teams, they have finance. All of our Val's department heads really are in a support category, if you want to talk about it that way. We're more of a consultants, especially from marketing. And then we work really well with our parent company as well as with all of the different networks. And part of that comes from the fact that we have what we call Symphony at NBCU. It was started by the legendary John Miller, and it really does enable us to have easy workflows and ways to collaborate and work together, whether it's a big corporate priority or it's the individual divisions and even down to the stations.
Meredith, why don't you give us a perspective on your challenge and
Sure. Well, first, Ken, thanks so much for having me. Thank you to TV News Check for hosting this. I love when marketing gets to share the spotlight in the industry. At Tegna, we have 64 stations in 51 markets. That includes 12 duopolies. And across the portfolio, we partner with 8 different affiliations. Most are Big 4, but we also have CW, My Network, Quest, and Estrella, so Spanish language as well, to what Teresa said. We have 2, soon to be 3 multicast networks that are almost all of our own stations. And that includes True Crime Network, Quest, and one that was just announced yesterday called Twist. We also have 100 total mobile Amazon Fire and Roku apps across the portfolio. We have 2 podcasting studios, Vault Studios for true crime, and a recent acquisition, Locked On, which has local sports podcasts across the country. And of course, I can't forget about our daily syndicated show, Daily Blast Live. So it's a powerful portfolio. And in terms of prioritization, I think that anyone can come clamoring for marketing support, right? It's always a balance between what are the business priorities and then the marketing priorities need to stem from there. So I'm very close with our C-suite in terms of looking at the company as a whole, seeing where the company wants to go, and then lining marketing up with that. At the station level, the stations have a lot of autonomy. We understand that every market is unique, and we really leave it to the local stations to determine the priorities that will move their business forward. Certainly, there's guidance to help them from corporate, from ratings to digital audience growth to revenue and so forth. But I'll give you, Ken, just an example of how that localization plays out. So, for example, our station in Atlanta is in a very competitive market. And a few years ago, their general manager set forward a strategy to win on digital, and win they have. Out of all the local broadcasters in the market, they are the #1 ComScore rated digital operation. And while that station is heaving up marketing around digital products, our CBS affiliate in San Antonio has been really focused on reshaping their brand image. And that strategy has helped them really see strong growth. So we leave it to each market to determine what their strategic plan is to win. And then our marketers prioritized based on that strategic plan while still staying flexible and nimble to the rapidly changing dynamics in the market.
Thank you. And Frank, what about Frocks?
Well, see, now I know why you had me go last, because we have a mere 28 stations in 17 markets. We've got 11 duopolies, 10 are MyNet or extended brands of the Fox station. That's becoming more sort of a trick that we're leaning on. Obviously, we've got a handful of DigiNets that we air. We only own one, which is movies, but we stream, or I should say, partner with people on 4 or 5 others that we run constantly. As you know, our company in the last year purchased Tubi, which has certainly helped focus us on streaming and how our business can sort of support that and be extended by it. So we're in the midst of a lot of different projects now that will sort of focus on that.
And then let me stay with you there, Frank, for a moment to follow up. So do you got, in terms of a priority, is it a station by station evaluation? And is that driven mostly by the general manager and the aspiration to make more money, or the, you know, is it, how do you look at each of these markets?
Yeah, look, I mean, like the others who spoke, they're businesses that are run, you know, on the ground by the general managers. I mean, they're certainly not in it to not make money, but they are left to the important decisions that pertain to their market, for sure. I mean, you know, we've never had sort of a corporate news director type person. You know, we sort of leave that to, you know, we have oversight, but, you know, we leave the X's and O's to the people on the ground. And so that's always been for all the years I've been at Fox. We've always had it that way.
And as you look across your station group, is there a particular thing that stands out in terms of the priority across those stations, or is it a mixture? In terms of
you always want to be, and this isn't unique. You want to be number 1 or number 2 in news in a market. You know, I mean, I think that's where you need to be. I think the ad market speaks to that too. I mean, you know, you're 4th, 5th, or 6th. You're not going to matter that much, and you know, you want to be number 1 or number 2, and how you get there can vary from market to market. And we have some stations that are further advanced than others, but I think that's always where you want to be.
And that's been consistent over the years, certainly with respect to
Total.
Fox.
Yep.
Now, Therese, turning to you on that same subject in terms of priorities, and is there a priority across all of them? Is it news, or is it something else relative to the products that you have?
Well, for the stations, it's, you know, really about how you're serving your communities and how you're serving them in a unique way. We also have been making a big transition to digital, as has everybody else. And we also are looking at how do we move forward in this economy? How do you move forward with ad sales? I think you probably saw, you know, Frank Comerford and Mike Chico have been leading the charge on moving to impressions, because we do believe that that is a much more stable way of looking at viewership. So when we look at what we want to do as a company from a division standpoint, we have a couple of big initiatives that we do work with all the stations. So Clear the Shelters is one of them. I'm proud to say that we have found forever homes for over 500,000 pets since 2015. We launched Supporting Our Schools in 2017. That's another one that goes out to all of the stations, and we've raised over $5 million, and I think it's like 1.5 million supplies that we've given out. We have Project Innovation, which is part of a Comcast grant program to look for nonprofits who are innovating in their markets. So those are the things that my department would work on and to help facilitate, but just about everything else is really handled down on the local level.
And do you find with respect to those stations that it's like with Frank, it's about news, or is it about driving the digital extensions, or, you know, what do you find is the common focus from a marketing point of view in the station?
It's a really good question. You're going to be known by your news product because, first of all, it's probably the largest chunk of time on your air. And that is how you're making your relationship with your audience. And then the marketing aspect of that, and I really firmly believe that the marketing leads at every station need to have a voice at the table, because marketing and the programming and the product have to go hand in hand. And so what we are now really looking at is, here's our product, here's our marketing, here's our brand. What does that look like across all of these different platforms, whether they're your own platforms or a third party? You have a much better opportunity to have your audience follow you across the different platforms if they already are one of your viewers and they trust what you are delivering to them on a regular basis.
So it stems in from the station, if you will, and news, and then pushing that out, from generally speaking.
Yes.
Is that the case at Tegna?
Somewhat, I would say that the umbrella is the brand. And for our marketers at Tegna, that's where everything starts, right? You have a master brand, and underneath it are all the sets of experiences that make up that brand. And really that's how we define brand, right? Brand is the set of experiences you offer to the world. So when you think about a local station, having a strong brand means that overall loyalty will go up regardless of the products that come and go. So think about a brand being the compilation of the morning experience, the late news experience, the Facebook experience, the Snap experience, the podcast experience, right? The experience of running into talent at a grocery store. All of those have to be aligned and consistent in order to attract and maintain loyalty. And so at the local level, our marketers are essentially the chief brand officers, right? Working across the building, getting everybody involved to curate the brand strategy and make sure that strategy is executed consistently. The news director kind of is responsible for how that shows up in the news product. The director of sales is responsible for executing that brand for clients. And what the marketer does is really facilitate that entire brand operation. So for us, it kind of starts from a place of brand, not necessarily from a place of product.
So
Does that make sense?
yeah, so in a way, and that's more of a something that's more common outside of television in terms of the way to look at it. So from your perspective, you would look at the individual station and look at, so if it was, you might have a number 3 or 4 station in the market in news, but it may be a gangbuster in terms of syndicated programming and prime time. So your focus there might be, in terms of that station's identity, more different than you may want to. You have aspirations for news, but it's a totally different expression, as opposed to being number 1 in news and being the leader in the market for decades.
Yeah, our theory is that if you have a strong brand, that is the tide that will lift all the boats, right? And so hopefully you start to see more consistency in the performance of all the different products. And we've seen that, for instance, at WFAA in Dallas. They did a lot of work on their brand starting 3 years ago, and all of a sudden, multiple day parts started lifting. The digital performance started lifting. Client revenue started lifting. So again, it's that common denominator that if you strengthen it, and if you live it out with consistency, some of that performance you start to see even out, as opposed to being number 1 in this area, number 4 in this area. Because frankly, for a marketer to be able to market all the products that a station has individually, I mean, they'd probably have a heart attack. There's so many products and experiences that a local station delivers today. I think marketers have to be really smart about how they can take it all to market under the construct of the local brand.
I think the heart attack comment resonates strongly for many of our viewers, because I think that's really the key question, is how one, if you're sitting in a marketplace, how do you go about having all of these different experiences put into one from a marketing point of view, and how do you sort of organize all your assets to emphasize something that's to some degree ephemeral?
It is a meaty challenge.
You have lots of duopolies, and some of them, your Foxes are are principally news oriented and day and date, but the second stations are not. So how do you necessarily? So how do you accommodate that in terms of your strategy in a local market in terms of presence?
First, I'd like to just expand a little bit on what Meredith said.
Please.
The idea of this brand as a station brand, product, good, bad, whatever it is, all being one, is something that you sort of on the coast sometimes forget. And I know last year our network took a pilgrimage to Kansas City to do some focus groups and to go to a Chiefs game, et cetera. And what came out of that was an amazement how much Channel 4 meant in Kansas City. It's just the brand of it. And the anchors are their friends. The syndicated personalities are part of the station. They're not produced by Sony. They're not produced by Warner Brothers. They are their friends that are on this channel in this brand. And it's still gigantic when executed effectively. It still is really, really big. So we strive to do that everywhere. So just to, I don't want to not answer your question. I just want
No, please.
on that. As far as primary stations and duopolies, it's been interesting because that we've had, obviously there's Fox affiliates, there's MyNet. The MyNets are sort of gravitating more towards extensions, brand extensions, if you will, of the Fox station. And whether it's San Francisco, which was never a MyNet when we purchased it, is sort of KTVU Plus, and you've got Dallas 4 for more. There's a bunch of that stuff going on that serves as an extension. We're starting to put more news on those stations. It's starting to become more one than two separate entities. I mean, still in terms of programming and lineups, you can see differences, but in an era where you don't necessarily have big budget prime time on MyNet or big budget sports, how do you use these outlets to your advantage? And that's one of the ways to do it. Is to make it an extension of the Fox station. So we're doing a lot of that, and it's working to varying degrees. In some cases, it's not, and we have to continue to sort of plug at it. But that's the challenge in markets where you might be a number 1 and a number 4, or a number 2 and a number 5. I mean, it doesn't mean the asset's not valuable, but how do you use it to your best advantage in the big picture? So we look at that a lot, and it's always changing. That's for sure. So.
Let me pull Steve in now, because all these people are turning to you, Steve, in terms of creative execution and ideas. And what's your reflection on what you're hearing in terms of the challenges that are out there for a marketer from a creative point of view? How do you look at this issue?
Well, we've got kind of an interesting perspective simply because we do over 400 stations, local stations, and we also do quite a bit of international work as well. So we are exposed to all kinds of challenges, from small stations, small groups to large groups and things like that. And so we're kind of in the trenches because we're dealing with it's everything from content to news promotion to to OTT, digital, and that type of thing. But we are seeing more and more of an emphasis on, conveying that brand very, very quickly, and with the concept, with the idea that if a brand's value can be conveyed in a matter of seconds, if it's done correctly. And then we're also very cognizant of the fact that there's obviously two sides to any kind of content marketing, and there's visual and there's the sound. And of course, we're a music company, and we feel like our approach has always been with our stations is to take a deep dive into the science behind the art of it, because there's just a lot of interesting science where hearing, the brain can understand sound much faster than it can visuals. And so I'm not sure if that's answering your question, but those are the challenges on a local level. And what's interesting is that, what works in Peoria doesn't work in Phoenix and so forth. And oftentimes you've got a news package, a branded news package that a station group is using, and it's the same music package that's airing in both. So we're constantly trying to get a feel for what the station's DNA is. We subscribe to Nielsen, which helps us give a little bit of an inside scoop on how the stations are doing. But all of the things that you all have been mentioning, so much of it too, I was a little overwhelmed listening to Therese and Meredith talk about everything that they're trying to handle. I'm kind of going, well, all I have to worry about is some phone calls and a piano and a guitar. So
Well, let's follow up on that, Steve, though, because I think in the implementation, right, and you've talked about the science of it, so we're now a lot more sophisticated in terms of the tools we have, which comes at a time where our reach and our frequency are all challenged. So, and we also have different weapons available. So they have diginets and they have websites and they have all other different ways to reach consumers. But they have many, many different messages. So what do you see in terms of the science that helps unify that from either a visual or an auditory point of view that might be an advantage?
Well, I think one thing is you can take the same sonic brand, so to speak, and you can put it in different environments that fit what the challenges are. So, and it used to be in the old days that, it was, big, bold, fast, urgent, and things like that. And now more of the packages that we're doing we're realizing that you could, we don't want to interrupt the content or the journalistic manner that we want to support it, but there are ways that you can, create something that's not the loudest and the biggest and not, like I say, outdo the content in the presentation. So a lot of the music we are producing is become a little more subtle, I would say, while still maintaining that mnemonic or that signature. One of the things I think that we're seeing is a challenge is that the workload at the local level is so huge, and they do have a lot of great sonic assets, but for them to plow through all that to grab the right one at the right time as quickly as it needs to happen is quite a challenge. So, but I do think it's very important because the brain is so complex, and emotion is what is what the brain has to deal with. And and the most important part of emotion, we feel, is the sound, because the sound is what creates the emotion. You can take a look at any kind of visual, take out the audio, and you can, and sometimes in some of our seminars, we've shown the same exact footage and put in something that's bold and fast, something else that's dramatic, something else that's very contemplative and reflectful, and the whole image changes. So, that's the challenge I see that a lot of the stations have is trying to find that appropriate piece of music that will support what the content is without interrupting the content.
Which in some sense is new and completely different. And for people that have been in marketing for a long period of time, the idea of having a similar mnemonic device out there that signifies all of these different things may be very challenging and different relative to thinking about, on air being the most important, radio being number two. I think those days have sort of gone by. Would that be your thought?
Yeah, I think it's really more a matter of taking the same mnemonic and putting in a different musical landscape, depending on what it is you're trying to promote and what kind of emotional connection you're trying to make with that particular audience. Just like what I don't know if it was Therese was talking about, all the education and the pets and things like that. You can take the same mnemonic and and it doesn't need to dominate. It doesn't need it just needs very, very subtle, even like I think Reuters is a good example. They've got, when you push on their app, they've got a very subtle, very quick thing, but it's a great little signature, and it kind of sets the tone for their, when they're doing their top of the hour, here's the breaking stories. But I still think that a good sonic brand, a good sonic stamp is essential for the audience to be able to connect with that across all the devices. I mean, as everybody knows, the days of linear are gone, and the Gen Xers and Zers and millennials and stuff like that, they're getting their content not the way that we all used to get it, and I think music used properly can help create that emotional connection.
Meredith, is that relative to your experience? Does that resonate? And if it does, relative to the resources and your station marketing people, is that a change that you've noticed?
In terms of establishing the emotional connection, absolutely. Especially in 2020. Think of all that consumers have been through in 2020 between COVID and social unrest and elections. They need to have a place to go that can respond to all of their needs and desires. Information needs and desires, emotional needs and desires, and others that emerge over time. So for us, we definitely have infused more humanity into our brand presentations, whether that's visually. We talk with our talent about how to create that connection with consumers. So absolutely, that emotional connection is critical. And I'll just give you one example. So we all obviously did COVID coverage when it hit our markets. One thing we did at Tegna is we stripped off the bright red, right? The alarming, scary, breaking news, dun, dun, dun. And we launched our news coverage banner under the term facts, not fear. And in marketing, we put our talent out in very calming, reassuring voices. This actually started in one market. They showed the rest of our collective what they did. And so we started to see some other versions emerge. But that was just very plain spoken. Here's how we're approaching our coverage. We're going to make sure that you have the facts. There's a lot of misinformation out there. We're going to be verifying it for you. And so, between sound, language, visual presentation, there is so much you can do to create that emotional connection. And I think that's just as important. I mean, if accuracy is paramount in journalism, emotional connection is paramount in marketing.
So Rich, let me pull over to you for, oh, I'm sorry, Steve, go ahead then on.
Yeah, I was just going to echo that point, because really what you're trying to do is use visuals, but more importantly, I think music and sound as kind of an audience brand touch point. And if you can do that consistently, then I think you've got a better chance to make that what Meredith was talking about, the emotional connection.
So Rich, from your point of view, you're a supplier to everybody, but you're only giving them a program or two. It has to fit into the station and so forth. So from the demands that are being placed upon you in terms of supporting your show, what have you been doing, and what do you understand the evolving role of the distributor to be, and how you can be more helpful?
Thanks, Ken. Thank you, TV News Check. Also, this is a great panel. I've really enjoyed listening to you guys. Meredith, a very succinct presentation, and I got a lot out of that. I think for all of us, we're contending with the same issues, whether we're distributors or broadcasters, and that is, just living in such a decimalized universe, and how to capture the fascination, the attention, and the imagination of consumers and viewers across, all these platforms existing and emerging. And it's a tall order. I did all, but I wanted to just respond a little bit to another the other topic about what stations are doing, and I've noticed that innovation is no respecter of either market rank nor group size. And for example, I'm thinking of stations like Kelo, Kelo, in Sioux Falls, and Kelo Land, and the incredible branding that they have there, and the extensions that they've built across multiple platforms, primarily on apps. I mean, they've got a weather app, they got a news app, they got what's going on around Kelo Land apps, and their own very robust OTT business. Capital Broadcasting for sure, WRAL, and they've been very innovative. Again, fairly small group, not big market size. And then of course you've got small groups like Graham Media have done amazing stuff in Houston. Martin's done a brilliant job at KPRC in Houston, and also WJXT in Jacksonville. And we remember that JXT, like WSVN in Miami and KRON in San Francisco, were big affiliates in their markets that had lost their affiliations, and they had to figure stuff out, and they did. And JXT has been very innovative over these recent years in taking advantage of all the digital tools that are at their disposal. And then I mentioned Cron. I grew up in San Francisco. I'm probably the only one here who was actually on-air talent there. Well, that's not true. I was a Cub Scout on Mayor Arch Wake Up Club on a Saturday morning one time. But they have a really incredible product called Cron On. And they have a web version, they have app versions, and I subscribe to it because I have my families up there. I want to know what's going on in the Bay Area. It's all, just as Meredith said, it's all about driving from the mothership primary brand across all these extensions and experiences, and integrating all of them. So from a syndication point of view, we're an independent, and we work, we're hand-to-hand combat. We work market by market, station by station. And so every situation is different. But what we're learning is by offering stations what they need to promote not only their brand, but our brand, if you will, inside of, and I like what Frank was talking about, Channel 4 in Kansas City. It's very true. A consumer viewer doesn't make the distinction between the syndicated show and the station they're watching. They think it all just emanates from the station. And so we do try to provide tools that are going to be useful across all the marketing platforms, including, for example, we still deliver spots for on-air use, but we don't do 30-second spots anymore. We do 10s and 15s, and that's what the utility is that stations will use. If they use them, they're going to use the short form promos, or we give them the tools to build them themselves. Secondly, we build short form content, 30 to 60-second elements from our product, like Just for Laughs gags. I mean, it's funny, you get 30 seconds of funny, and that can live, again, across all platforms, including all the, Instagram and Facebook, and all the social media platforms, and the actual station's local app. So we can offer that to our stations for all of our product. And that is the new reality. I mean, we're competing for eyeballs for our long form content on our primary venues, stations, but there's a lot going on in the short form world. Look at TikTok and Facebook, and so providing content that matches with the brand, that helps promote the brand, that can live in these digital extensions, are things that we can and do to support our stations.
So let me throw it open to the group, and especially the station people, because we've been getting a bunch of commentary about hubbing and about costs and about demands from GSMs for sales and so forth. People who are not really trained in marketing. And it's not as if the marketing departments are more robust than these television stations. So the question is, from the person in the average market, if you were starting out or giving advice to them, what are the skills you think they need and where should they be focusing? Because obviously the resources are less, the competition is more, and they're just trying to create a process that makes sense to optimize the strength that they have. And it still seems that the strength emanates from the station. So I throw that open to anyone, well, who's brave enough to take it on.
If I can go, yeah, I think the station is very strong, and we've mentioned the Kansas City sort of example. But that brand is, that sort of free over the air idea is still very powerful and will exist. What's interesting is this idea of obviously streaming, and what's very interesting to me is this idea of the news feeds going on the streaming services. You've got actual newscasts in real time going on the streaming services, sometimes all day for a given station. A lot of people are doing it. But what's interesting to me about that is to what degree does that sort of morph into what the station of the future is going to be? Because, when we're spending time now thinking about, what goes in between those newscasts on those streaming signals. And so it wouldn't just be news or a logo in between the newscast, but what can sort of be put in the middle of all of that would make sense, extend the brand, and also, appeal to some younger viewers, because the idea that, our traditional over-the-air stations are going to be, in a situation where there's so many people leaving the demo and not as much coming in as far as viewers, that's a real challenge. So to what degree did we use streaming to sort of help equalize that? And at what point does that become the primary idea? Is it 5 years from now, 10 years from now? I don't know. I mean, the FCC might have something to say about that, but that does feel like where things are going.
And if I can, just for a second, I wanted to go back to something that Steve said. I agree with one thing and I disagree with another. I agree with you about the importance of music and mnemonics, because we have the NBC chimes, and I can tell you what the emotional chord that those strike with a lot of people, myself included, when I hear that. But the comment that linear is dead, I think, is really misleading for a lot of people, because when you look at the past year and the sheer volume of the people who turned to their local stations to hear about what was happening with the virus in their markets, what was happening with everything from the social justice movement, what was happening with the election, those are, yes, it's a national story, but those are local stories. And when something like that is happening, you want to go to somebody that you trust, somebody that you're familiar with, that you may have an affinity for the brand or some of their other products. But it's the infrastructure of the local stations that allow for the content to go across to all of those other platforms. Because if you didn't have the investigative teams and the reporters on the street and the producers that are behind the scenes who are working on the stories, then you're just talking about a building. You're not talking about an actual living, breathing environment where people are coming to work every day to support their local communities.
Meredith?
Well, Ken, I think that the question on the table was, if you are a local marketer, how do you sort of handle the GSM coming at you, the GM, everybody kind of coming at you? And it's true. The work we do is like standing on one leg and spinning a bunch of plates in the air, trying to make sure none of them crash. And I think the very first thing, if you had unlimited resources, we talked about this in the pre-call, kind of what marketing tactics and strategies would work best. The first thing I would do if I was a marketing director is look at my people multiple times a year, every year. Do you have the right people on your team helping you move the business in the direction it needs to go? It is the strategists, it is the creatives that make the brand work. And so investing in the talent and then the tools they have to work with, that's the number one tactic I deploy is how, and that can be boring stuff. A lot of us don't like to talk about workflow, but if you don't have your workflow under control, there's no way you're going to be able to manage the volume and the voices that are coming at you every day. So tools and technology are the first thing that I personally would look at in order to manage the balance.
Because go ahead, Steve, please.
Real quick, because Teresa, yeah, I mean, I agree with you, what you're saying, but I think that the days of what we're seeing is the kind of the appointment of linear, where, okay, 6 o'clock, you get your news and things like that. What I was referring to was more to do with being able to get this local, hyper local information that's so important that you mentioned, but being able to get it on demand versus what we kind of refer to as more of an appointment type of thing, where you watch the news at 6 or 11 or so on and so forth.
Oh, no, I understand that. And we've done, we've followed what the consumer wanted to do, right? Is they wanted to watch things on demand. They want to watch it where they want it, when they want it, on a variety of different platforms. Our job is to get that out to them. But we also have to be very cognizant of the fact that you can't get yourselves too stretched. To what Meredith was talking about too, is you have so many demands coming at you, not only from your company and your GSMs, but then you have the programming requests, then you have PSA requests, then you have local community requests. I always joke that if we could make another hour, we would fill it up anyway, so a 25-hour day wouldn't really help us. But I think, again, to what Mary was talking about as far as the question, you have to be a really good multitasker now. The days of just being a good topical promo producer and then you could kind of rise through the ranks, you now have to have so many more skills. I still, however, believe that it starts with really good writing, because everything is about telling a story. And it's whether you're telling a story in 4 seconds or 30 seconds or a 3-minute piece. You have to be able to connect with your audience. So before I, even start talking to people about the job themselves and what they're open, I really look at, do you have a passion for storytelling? Do you have a natural curiosity, which is something you really need if you're going to be in a newsroom? And do you really like the idea of connecting with people on different platforms? We've been really fortunate. I started a promo trainee program 3 years ago, and we actually have had 3 success stories with it. Most of them are digital natives. One is bilingual. So we've actually been able to, utilize their skills and then help us shape what we need to look for in the future. So we don't just go out looking for a promo producer anymore. We'll go out looking for a multi-platform producer who may at some point do long form, or who may be working on something that's going to go out of home. But the core comes back to, do you understand the brand and can you live and breathe the brand? And part of that is the job of the brand director or the creative services director, whatever you're calling it at the station, is they really need to be that brand ambassador to make sure that everybody else is on board and that they know the correct way to talk about their brand.
Sure.
I think that's right. Ken, I would just say, marketing local news is not for the faint of heart. Okay. It is, you have to have a strong skin, you have to have endurance, and you have to have determination. The first thing that we've been talking to our teams about, of course, over 2020 is self-care and good leadership.
Mm-hmm.
If you are not strong in the self, you will never be able to be strong for your station. And we also talk about, a marketing calendar that's so basic, but it is critical if you're going to stay organized and balance all of these priorities. And to Teresa's point, you have to be someone who has a hold on the master brand and can activate it so that that brand is working as hard for you as possible. And I would also just advise everybody who's listening, everyone now needs to be a marketer, not just the marketing department. Right? In order to get the word out about the priorities that we have, it becomes about leveraging our employees, our talent, social accounts, our on-air content, our digital products. Everybody in the building has got to play a role in that. And I think the best marketers make sure that all of the different elements of the building are working in concert and that each platform is pitching to each other. So I think that's just another skill as we think about the marketers of the future, that some of the folks listening might want to be thinking about how they cultivate that skill within themselves.
think that's a very strong point because I know television having been such a dominant force and everybody growing up, and now with all of this constant change, I think the skills that worked previously were built in a different era. And it's been very, very challenging in creating a lot of anxiety, not only for the individual marketer, but within the corporations themselves and with the stations in terms of thinking about themselves as in a cultural and marketing fashion. And if you will, it's the key department, it's the mall in the center of the city, but how am I going to get those anchors and how am I going to play and what kind of displays am I going to make, and thinking in a broader way. And one of the things I think also I've heard is if you put into effect a process, if you will, so that the hubbing, all of the things that are coming as a result of efficiency are things that you do not have to do. You don't have to cut, because your responsibility is looking at the mother station, the second station, the diginets, and having a notion about how you're going to have a unified presentation that serves everyone. Is that sort of where this world is going? Frank, what do you think?
Well, first of all, I'd just like to talk about, again, what Meredith was, just sort of build on that a little bit. The other good news, I mean, if there's anything that came out of COVID and stay at home, is now you can recruit from all over the country, as opposed to necessarily, you got to move here, you have to move there. You have a much bigger pool to draw from, I think, which is great, which is just can only help. Anyway, I'm sorry, Ken, what was your real question?
No, my real question was, is it more about process and larger thinking than the individual, where are these spots going and what am I cutting at this particular moment in order to be most effective running a station?
Look, it's always both, but it's more larger. It has to be, because this is all changing too fast for it to not be. And the best marketers are going to be able to look around the corner and see what's coming, what platform's coming, and where we have to be before anyone else gets there. So I think the larger picture is larger than ever before.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say there are some things that you can hub, that work well. We have Art House that's down in Dallas, and they do all the graphics for our stations. But there's some things that just can't be, and individual brands and marketing campaigns really have to be at the local level. Before I got to NBC, they had consolidated everything up into a marketing headquarters, and the stations were getting handed down promos from an agency that was basically doing the same promo for all 10 stations. And it looked like it belonged more to the tourist board of that city than it did about the station. So one of the first things that Val did when she became the president of Vision was dismantled that and gave the responsibility and the authority back down to the stations and to the promo departments, which quite frankly, we had to rebuild because they had really been cut back. But I think we also all realize that it's as advisors or consultants, or however we look at our jobs, we don't live in all of those markets. So you really need to have the people there who can, live and breathe and touch that market in a way that they understand what the people that they're serving need.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. For us at Tegna, what's worked is a hybrid model where you have some shared services that are hubbed, graphics, maybe client solutions, but the rest really all comes from the local market. I will say what has been a real benefit to us is creating a collective of all the marketers. So we have about 370 marketers at Tegna. And what I tell candidates as they're coming in, I don't want you to feel like you are one marketer with a team of 7 in a given market. I want you to feel that you are one of 370 marketers around the entire country. And while we have a lot of synergy at Tegna between the assets, we promote Locked On from the sports podcast, and Daily Blast Live puts the journals on the air. The best synergy we have is talent synergy, where somebody up in Maine is doing a huge campaign and they need a great shooter or writer. And I happen to have a really amazing copywriter in Phoenix that can partner with them. That is the best form of synergy. And I think approaching our talent from a collective viewpoint as opposed to just individual stations, that's been a real game changer for us.
And was that brought on by the necessities of the pandemic? Is that an accelerator or was that there before?
No, I mean, I think that's something, this is going to sound so egocentric, but that I brought. You know, I didn't come from local broadcast when Dave Luigi took a risk on me about 8 years ago. But I had come from the PR world to start. And in that world, it's all about the account team. Everyone is a team. And so I wanted, when I joined the company, to create a team spirit. I had also worked on the cable side of the business where I was used to a lot more resources. So when I came to Tegna and I saw in the local news industry that the marketers didn't have huge resources, I said, oh my God, how do we get everybody more resources? Well, we got more resources by coming together as a large national marketing team. Everyone still has responsibility for their station, but that's how you get more resources, is leveraging the collective minds of the entire group.
Is that something that you guys do at Fox, Frank, in terms of trying to leverage that, especially now that the pandemic has come and everybody is always available?
Sure. Oh, absolutely. There's no question.
Therese, what is it? Is there anything that you've heard that we haven't heard from that you think would be helpful to people as we come around the corner here with coming to the finish line?
No, I just think this was a great forum. I thank you so much for putting it together. Thanks to you and TV News Check. I'm always happy to talk about broadcast, especially when it comes to marketing. I just want to let everybody know that I think it's one of the toughest jobs that you can have, is to be the brand director at a station. I had it years ago and I didn't have nearly the amount of platforms that we had to do. And I didn't have to worry about as many competitors. So my hat's off to all of the brand directors that are out there.
Rich, I want to turn to you for a second, and I'll go to Steve.
I think there's a whole nother panel to talk about sort of the post-COVID world. Something Frank said was interesting, is that, you know, the recruiting opportunities have really expanded in this new world order. And I'd be very curious to know whether people think that is just going to be the world order going forward, or, you know, but I think that's another panel, but it's certainly an interesting discussion.
You could certainly go on for another hour, but we can't. Steve, what do you hear, and what are your thoughts that could be most helpful to those marketers out there?
Well, I think something that Therese said, which was, I thought, really interesting, because us being in Dallas, we're very familiar with the art house. And I thought it was interesting, your perspective, Teresa, about how you decentralize that, because it's all about the hyper local content. One thing I just wanted to suggest, one thing we've seen, like I say, since we're kind of in the trenches in a lot of different things, is the way that a lot of the promos are done now that we're starting to do is from the viewer's perspective versus the station talking about the station and what they do and stuff like that. So I could go forever on that, but it is a very interesting flip when you promote from what the viewer is seeing and saying versus what the station is trying to tell the viewers. It's what
You've got another minute. Please explain a little bit more on that.
Well, there's, like, we no longer sing the name of the station or the call letters and stuff like that, but it's promos from viewers. Like if we're doing an image song, they're singing and talking, and even the promos are about the viewer's perspective of what's going on there. And by doing that, there's sort of a buy-in from the viewer of, oh wow, this is me. It's relating to me. So
sounds like a profound switch for traditional broadcasters. That is sort of, the mirror is coming from the viewer, not from the station backwards. Yeah,
this has really kind of come around the last 2 or 3 years that we've seen more and more, and it kind of helps get away from the chest thumping and the proof of performance type of stuff, and gets more, so it gets a little more hyper local, and it produces just a little more sincerity, I think, with with the viewer and those little touch points.
It certainly helps also with the emotion piece, which you've pointed out is an incredible, and everybody else is an incredibly important piece, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Meredith?
Well, listen, thank you for doing this panel, and thank you to everybody listening. I just posted in the chat, our industry is strong because of all of you. And I know it's been hard, and I know it's been painful this year, but you're doing amazing. Not just the people at Tegna, but all over the industry. I've seen incredible work. So my biggest message to you is to take care of yourselves, to be strong for you so you can be strong for others, so you can be strong for the industry. We need you. We need you at your best. And so, Ken, those are my sort of final words of wisdom, is just take care of you, and the rest will take care of itself.
After having said that, I have to throw it to Frank. Frank?
Other than wanting to buy Rich's pianos and Steven's studio, now that's right at the top. Now, the last thing that I would say for marketers in general, obviously we spent an hour talking about the brand, but watch the programs. We are so bombarded with content right now. It seems like an arms race between new streaming services going up, stations acquiring everything they can, more and more diginets all the time. It's easy to sort of lose sight of the fact that, this is entertainment, it's programming. Certainly news provides a service, but watch the programs. You'll market them better. Watch them and know what's going on within these programs. Real important.
Well, I want to thank, this has been a fabulous conversation. I can't thank all of you enough. It's been incredibly generous of you to give your time. I think as a retired exec at this point, but having worked at with many of you and in many of these markets, I know how challenging it is. But I do think a revolution we are well into a revolution. It has always been about marketing that was sort of disguised because distribution and other things seem to be more important. But at the end of the day, what you guys do and how the processes that you bring to bear, I think, are the ultimate arbiter of whether people are going to be there or not. So I join everybody in sending a big hello to all of you and a big virtual hug, because this year has been a beast and everybody's been working incredibly hard. And we wish you get your shots, stay healthy, and work well. And thank you again to the panel. Thank you very much.
Good job, Ken.
You
Good
can.
job, Ken.
Great job.
Nice work, Kenny.
Guys.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay. Are we still cooked?
Ken, I do have to run, but I stayed on just to say thank you. I thought it went very, very well, and it was a great discussion. And Kathy, I want to thank you for all the behind the scenes work, all the organization, and Josiah. I'm glad the tech all worked. So it was a real privilege to be here. Thank you.
Meredith, you did a fabulous job, and I thought I'm a descendant of Carol Black, and the Disney days and everything that you had to say, I thought was very forward thinking and a great balance. And I think people heard you. So you did a wonderful job. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken, so much. I hope the opportunity one day will come for us to visit in person.
Well, if you come to California, I'm here. That's my daughter lives in DC. Are you in DC? You're in DC, right?
Yeah, just outside in Maryland.
Oh, yeah. All right. Well, yeah, so I have a wedding there. So there may be an opportunity along the way.
Please
I look
do
forward to
stay in
that.
touch.
And please say hello to my buddies.
I sure will. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks again to all of our attendees for joining the webinar. Thanks to our speakers, Gamba, Meredith Conti, Frank Cicho, Stephen Arnold, Rich Colbert, and Ken Werner. TV News Check, keep an eye on us. We're going to be launching a new newsletter, Marketing Monday, sometime in March. We'll send you an alert once it's ready to go. Thanks, everybody, and have a great day. Bye, Ken.